So the second phase after you do your audit is what I call the low-fi capture. Once again, it is the low-fi capture. So when it back in the day, and I still have this concept when I work with major businesses, when it comes to creating documentation, most people think an SOP is a 25 to 30 page document that you have to sit down and write. And sometimes that may be the case because you want to have something tangible. However, one of the hacks, so to speak, when it comes to creating a documentation is actually recording what you are doing. As an example, if you are an accountant and you are closing your books or closing a client's books for the month, right? You can actually, when I say this, you can screen record what you are doing. Of course, block out the PII or the personal identifiable information. I know I shouldn't have to say that, but I still wanted to say that. But you screen capture and record what you are specifically doing throughout that process from the very beginning to the very end, right? The process written down may be, 15 to 20 pages, but actual video, it could be maybe a 15-minute video. And nowadays, people are more prone to video because even though these documents are in place and it's a step-by-step procedure, I don't understand what it is. A lot of people don't read. They skim, but they don't read. However, the low-fi capture is actually recording, if possible, what's on your screen. The next thing that you would want to do after you record it, you would want to get the video transcribed, right? Because getting the video transcribed is taking the video and the audio and what you are saying and is actually breaking it down via text, right? So you have a pool of text based off of the steps that you have taken when it comes to the video. So after you do that, then you would want to go with these three things. You want to talk about the input, meaning what do I need to start, right? What's the starting point based off of this transcription? The next thing is the action. What are the 5 to 10? It could be more steps. I just want to use that as a 5 to 10 as a parameter. What are the 5 to 10 steps that are needed to go from the beginning of this procedure to the end? And then last but not least is the overall output. What does done, finito, finished, what completion, what does that ultimately look like from the very beginning to the very end, right? So once you have that, now you've taken the video, the audio, the transcription, and actually organized it in a manner where you have a document. Once again, it is a great hack to go from visualization to actual text, right? The next thing you will want to do is do something what I call a stress test. And what a stress test is, if you give that actual video and that document to someone that potentially may not do that job, right? The reason being is if someone that doesn't do that job on a daily basis can follow what you have documented to a T from beginning to completion, it is somewhat of a bulletproof procedure, right? Because sometimes when you create a procedure and the person who's writing it is the one that's actually doing the work, subconsciously, without even knowing, they may skip a step because they're so used to doing it, especially if they are going from having the documentation in their head and putting it on a sheet of paper. But you know for a fact that if it's a IT procedure or if it's an accounting procedure and you have someone in IT test it out step by step and they can go from beginning to end, you have a very good documentation. And then last but not least, you want to find a centralized place where you can store these procedures where the necessary people can have access to it, right? Back in the day, and I still see people do this, you have binders where you put these SOPs, but with tools like the web-based version of, well, like, for example, Dropbox or Google, Google Drive, or any type of, web-based storage, you can easily upload that version of that procedure and just have the link readily available. So if someone needs to execute that process, they can actually just click on the link, boom, done, they're good to go, right? So those 5 steps is a high level way for you to go from chaos to catalog, because you're going from not having your procedures documented, especially if it's your most important procedures, and then taking these easy steps to go from not having anything to something tangible that you can continue to use on a regular basis, especially if you are the business owner and you have identified 50 to 80% of the repeatable tasks. Once you have that documented, you can give that to someone else, and that will save you 50 to 80% of your time. Just imagine what you can do with the time that you are saving. You can probably focus on your zone of genius and what you do well for the business and continue to do that. Let me put this in a better context, right? Let's say if you are great at sales in your business, right? But once again, you have to do all of the repeatable tasks. Once you, and what you do with sales, let's say you make $50,000 a month just doing sales in addition to the repeatable tasks that you do. If you just save yourself between 50 and 80% of your time, you can almost double or even triple the amount of money that you make, because the time that you are saving with this procedure and you give it to someone else to do, that's more time you can focus on sales. And if you focus more on sales, the more sales you can close and the more money that you can make within your business, right? So just putting that into context for people who think that, writing procedures is boring or it's useless, it can ultimately save you time and make you more money in your business, right? So a huge myth that I kind of diminish when it comes to a lot of my clients, they have the myth that standard operating procedures stifle creativity and are only for Fortune 500 companies, which is 100% false. It's maybe 1,000% false. And let me give you an example. Let's say you are a creative and your goal is to create graphic design or artwork for your clients, right? That's your zone of genius. That's your zone of creativity. You don't necessarily have to standardize how you actually create the art, which is the biggest misconception, but you may want to standardize what you do as you bring them into your ecosystem, have you convert them to being clients, and then after the fact, after you deliver the product, right? So you can still have that zone of creativity, but let's say if you are spending, 10 hours a day, well, not 10 hours a day, let me take that back, 10 hours a week trying to filter out leads and things of that nature. You have a system to capture those leads, and even more importantly, a system to actually onboard them as a client. That can save you more time, effort, and energy. Once again, it's not putting in a standard on how you create the art and things of that nature. That's how you can be free, but you need a standard way to bring them into your fold, and you need a standard way to actually close them out. Once again, that zone of creativity has not been touched, but you need some organization on how to get clients and actually how to close out these clients at the end of the day. Once again, not focusing on the center of it, but it's what you do before and what you do after. That is something that could be easily systematized to the point where it doesn't mess with your creative zone or your creative genius, right?